Welcome to Life Stories, where we share powerful and inspiring tales of resilience, transformation, and triumph. Today's story is one of courage, where a woman fights against years of being overlooked and underestimated, and discovers her true strength. In a marriage that seemed perfect from the outside, she was pushed to the edge by a man who never saw her as an equal. But in a shocking turn of events, she reveals her hidden power, turning the tables and reclaiming her life. Stay tuned as we begin this incredible journey today. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow more amazing life stories. It was a day like no other. My wedding day. The grand hall was alive with sparkling lights, the air thick with the scent of roses and champagne, and the murmur of guests who arrived in luxury cars. There he stood, John, looking every bit the picture of success. His tailored suit, the one he'd spent hours choosing, seemed to fit him perfectly, just like the life he promised us. I was no different from the many brides who had come before me, hopeful and eager for the future. The only difference was that I truly believed in the dream he painted for me. I saw the admiration in his eyes as he held my hand with such a possessive grip, whispering promises of love, stability, and admiration. I remember feeling as though the world had conspired to bring us together. That somehow, we were destined for greatness. He was everything I had ever wanted, charismatic, intelligent, successful, and so very convincing. His words flowed like honey, painting a future where we would thrive together. I believed him. I believed in us. He spoke of the life we would build. A life filled with stability, success, and respect. His career was already taking off, and with me by his side, it felt as though nothing could stand in our way. I saw myself as his equal, his partner, after all. That's what we were meant to be, right? Equal partners. And yet, as the years passed, I began to realize that, for him, I was just another accessory to his success, a footnote in the grand story of his life. Our early years together were filled with compromises, though most of them were mine. As John climbed the corporate ladder, I put my dreams on hold. There were late nights spent proofreading his reports, preparing dinners he barely touched, and attending events where I was introduced only as his wife, not as someone with thoughts or aspirations of my own. At first, I consoled myself, telling myself that this was what being a supportive spouse meant. Surely, one day, he would recognize the sacrifices I made for his career. Surely, he would see how much I had given up for him. But as the years went by, the truth became clearer. He saw me not as his equal partner, but as someone who maintained the household while he pursued his ambitions. His dismissive comments became more frequent. When I hinted at wanting to do something for myself, whether it was pursuing a professional course or starting my own business, he simply scoffed. "You don't need a career," he'd say. "My success is our success." It was as though my existence and my worth were defined entirely by his achievements. And each time I mentioned my dreams, his words were final, cutting me down in front of friends and family, leaving no room for rebuttal. The pain of those words grew heavier over time. I started to bury my dreams, pushing them further and further down until I almost couldn't remember them anymore. But I didn't forget the feeling of longing, the gnawing sense that something was missing, that I wasn't living for myself. And as I buried my own desires, resentment began to quietly build beneath the surface. John didn't see it. He never saw it. To him, I was the one who should be grateful for the life he had provided. The grand house, the shiny cars, the vacations, these were the privileges I should be thankful for. "You don't have to worry about bills. You don't have to work," he'd say, as though those were the only measures of a fulfilling life. But what he failed to understand was that I wasn't looking for luxury. I wasn't seeking the perfect house or a life free from financial worry. What I craved was purpose. I wanted to matter, not just as his wife, but as an individual with her own aspirations and ambitions. There were moments, small moments, when I tried to assert myself, to claim a little space for me. But each time I did, he pushed me back. At social events, while John was greeted with admiration from his colleagues, I was treated like a shadow. The wives of his co-workers barely acknowledged my presence. I was introduced, but only as John's wife, not by my own name. I became invisible in their world, a silent figure who existed only to support him, to bolster his image. And when I tried to speak, when I tried to share my thoughts, John would quickly interject, steering the conversation back to himself. The worst part wasn't that he dismissed me, it was that he seemed to think I should be grateful for it. I watched as his career soared, his name becoming synonymous with success. He thrived in a world of power, respect, and admiration, while I remained in the background, an afterthought in his life. Every promotion, every accomplishment, only reinforced the idea that I was nothing without him. His arrogance grew, and so did my isolation. He would laugh with his colleagues, joking that I would be lost without him. I could feel my own sense of self-worth withering under his condescension. And for the first time, I wondered if I was truly nothing. But the truth, the painful truth, was that I wasn't nothing. He had underestimated me in ways he couldn't even comprehend. And as the years went on, I began to realize just how capable I was, far more capable than he had ever given me credit for. The question was no longer if I could break free from his shadow, but when. And that was when I knew, deep down, that the life I had built with him was no longer enough. There had to be more. I couldn't keep pretending that this was the life I had chosen. But how could I break free from the chains of his expectations, his power, and his belief that I needed him? This is where my story begins. But it wasn't the end yet. The moment came quietly, almost imperceptibly. It wasn't some grand gesture or sudden outburst that signaled the breaking point, it was the slow, suffocating realization that I had been living in a gilded cage for too long. It was at a dinner party. One of those meticulously planned evenings where John invited his colleagues, clients, and business partners, all men and women who carried themselves with an air of unshakable confidence. They filled the room with their laughter, their stories of triumph, their shared experiences of success, while I stood in the corner, silently refilling glasses, ensuring everyone was comfortable. I was nothing more than an extension of the catering service, a servant in my own home. As the evening wore on, a conversation shifted towards ambition, success, and the future. A woman, one of John's colleagues, turned to me and casually asked, "And what do you do, Emily?" Before I could answer, John, who had been enjoying the conversation, chuckled dismissively. "Oh, she doesn't work," he said, as though it was nothing more than a casual fact. "She just enjoys the luxury." The words stung. But what stung even more was the reaction of the room. People nodded in understanding, their polite smiles barely masking their judgment. The whispers began, the knowing glances exchanged, and suddenly, I felt like a ghost, invisible. It was then that I knew, this couldn't go on. I could no longer live in the shadows of his success. Forever overlooked, forever ignored. That was the moment, the tipping point when I realized I needed to leave. I didn't make the decision overnight, though. It wasn't something I could do in haste. Not when John had spent so many years making me believe I was powerless. His arrogance had clouded my every move. His dismissiveness had left me unsure of myself. But deep down, I knew he had no idea just how much I had been planning in secret. John thought I was dependent on him. He believed that without him, I was nothing. His confidence in this assumption was unwavering. He didn't know that while he was building his empire, I was quietly laying the foundation for my own future. It had taken years, but I had been quietly saving money, investing it carefully in ventures he never noticed. I had created a small but growing consulting business. It wasn't much at first, just a few clients, some initial projects, but it was mine. It was mine in a way nothing else in my life had ever been. The truth was, I had never truly stopped dreaming. I had hidden those dreams deep within me, burying them in the hopes that one day, John would notice. But he never did. Instead, he continued to belittle me, dismissing my every attempt to carve out my own space in this world. The process of preparing to leave was slow, deliberate, and secretive. I began to gather documents, consult with a lawyer, and secure assets that were rightfully mine. I had to be prepared. If I walked away unprepared, he would use his influence, his connections, to make me regret it. He would never let me go without a fight. So, I made sure that when the time came, I would have the power to stand firm, to stand strong. The final straw came one evening when John hosted a dinner to celebrate a massive contract he had secured at work. The evening was filled with pomp and grandeur, with guests fawning over him, praising his success. I spent hours preparing, cooking, arranging flowers, making sure everything was perfect. I wanted, just once, for him to acknowledge my efforts. But when the guests arrived, I was nothing more than an afterthought. I was the one who fetched drinks, who ensured everyone's comfort, while John basked in the spotlight, relishing the admiration of his colleagues. It wasn't just that he ignored me, it was the way he treated me. At one point, when I tried to contribute to a conversation about business, he interrupted me with a laugh. "Sweetheart, this is a serious discussion. Maybe you should focus on making sure the wine keeps flowing." The guests laughed. I smiled. But inside, I was burning. The humiliation was unbearable. He had reduced me to nothing, in front of people who had never seen me as anything more than his wife. I was once again reminded of my place in his world. Later that night, after the last guest had left, I confronted him. "Do you even realize how humiliating it is to be treated like I'm nothing more than a servant in my own home?" He scoffed, pouring himself another drink. "Oh, stop being so sensitive. You don't contribute financially, so the least you can do is make things pleasant for the people who do." His words were like daggers. In that moment, I knew that I wasn't just his wife, I was a convenience in his well-ordered life. Someone to fill the spaces between his career achievements. And that's when I knew. This marriage wasn't just flawed, it was suffocating me. It wasn't just his arrogance I couldn't bear anymore, it was the realization that I had been allowing it to happen. For years, I had put his needs first, always convincing myself that this was what being a good wife meant. But now, I saw the truth. I was more than this. I deserved more than this. It was time. Time to stop pretending. Time to stop living in his shadow. Time to stop allowing his dismissiveness to define who I was. It wasn't going to be easy. But I was done. The cage had opened. And I was finally ready to step out. The day I finally told John the First wanted a divorce, I braced myself for his reaction. I had prepared for this moment for months. Quietly, carefully laying the foundation for my escape. But when I spoke the words, I was met with laughter. John, who had always been so confident in his own superiority, laughed in my face. "You?" he sneered. "Where will you go? You have nothing. You're nothing without me." His arrogance was so absolute, so blinding, that he truly believed I had no power in this situation. He was certain that I would be nothing without his wealth, without his influence. I could see it in his eyes. He was convinced that he had won, that I was just another woman clinging to a life I couldn't sustain without him. He agreed to the divorce, expecting that it would be a quick, easy process, one that would leave him with everything. But he had no idea what was coming next. When we went to court, it was clear from the moment we entered that John had already written the narrative. He strode into the courtroom with all the confidence of a man who believed he had already won. His lawyer, one of the most expensive in the city, presented their case with arrogance, painting me as nothing more than an ungrateful wife who had contributed nothing to the marriage. "She has no financial stake, no career, no skills," his lawyer argued, as though these were facts that could not be disputed. My client has been more than generous in offering her a settlement. I sat quietly, listening to their accusations, feeling the weight of their words pressing down on me. They painted me as a passive bystander, someone who had simply existed in the background while John built his empire. The judge listened, his face impassive, but I could sense the growing tension in the room. Everyone was waiting for me to break, to beg, to cry for a settlement, but I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. Not yet. When the judge turned to my lawyer and asked if I had anything to say, I took a deep breath. It was time. I stood, my legs shaking slightly, but I steadied myself. This wasn't just about a divorce. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my identity, and my life. The silence in the courtroom was deafening as I took a step forward. All eyes were on me, John, his lawyer, the judge, and the spectators. They were waiting for me to crumble under the pressure, to show them the weakness they had expected. But I didn't. Instead, I spoke. Actually, Your Honor, I have something to add. My voice was steady, unwavering. It cut through the tension like a blade. And for the first time that day, John's smirk faltered. I pulled a folder from my briefcase, placing it in front of me. The documents inside were the culmination of everything I had built in secret over the years. While John had been focused on his career, I had been quietly building my own. These are financial statements, contracts, and patent filings, all under my name, I said. Watching as the courtroom fell silent, John leaned forward, his arrogance slipping as he looked at the papers in my hands. What is this? He muttered, his voice suddenly lacking its usual confidence. The judge took the papers from me, flipping through them as he read. His eyebrows furrowed slightly as he examined the documents. These show a series of substantial investments, the judge said, clearly surprised. And a business founded by you? I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. Yes, Your Honor. I've developed a technology-based consulting firm. It started small, but over the years, it has grown. I never told John because I wanted to see if he would ever truly see me as an equal. The courtroom erupted into murmurs, and John's face turned a shade of red I had never seen before. His smirk was gone, replaced by something much darker. This is ridiculous, he scoffed. But even his words lacked conviction. She hid this from me. This is deceitful. The judge continued to flip through the papers, his eyes widening slightly as he read the financial reports. You're telling the court that while your husband was claiming you contributed nothing, you were operating a company that is currently valued at. The judge glanced down at the report, his voice trailing off in disbelief. Over $15 million? A gasp echoed through the room, and I could feel the shift in the air. The narrative that John had built about me, the one that had painted me as a helpless, dependent woman, was crumbling before everyone's eyes. John sat back in his chair, the color draining from his face. The judge's gaze shifted between us, his expression now one of intrigue. So let me get this straight, he said, looking directly at John. You've been testifying that your wife was a passive bystander, contributing nothing of value, while she was quietly running a multi-million-dollar business that you were completely unaware of? John stammered, his words failing him. She never told me. This is deceitful, but the courtroom had already seen the truth. The whispers grew louder, and I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time in years, I was being seen for who I truly was, not just as John's wife, but as someone with strength, intelligence, and ambition. John's lawyer, who had been so smug just moments before, was now scrambling to adjust their argument. But it was too late. The truth was out, and nothing could change that. I turned to face John, fully aware of the fear in his eyes. I never told you, I said softly. Because you never cared to ask. It was the final blow. And for the first time, I saw him truly lost. As the courtroom buzzed with the aftermath of the revelation, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. The battle I had fought in silence, The years of humiliation and dismissal had led to this moment, my moment. It wasn't about revenge or vindication, it was about reclaiming my own life. My own voice. When the judge finally delivered his ruling, it was swift and decisive. Given the evidence presented, he began. I see no reason to grant the initial settlement in favor of Mr. Hayes. It is clear that Mrs. Hayes has built a successful enterprise separate from her husband's contributions. John's face drained of all color as the judge's words echoed in the room. The man who had once believed himself untouchable was now facing the consequences of his arrogance. He had underestimated me. And now, the truth had shattered his carefully constructed image. The courtroom was filled with whispers, and even the media began to take notice of the woman who had outsmarted the man who thought he controlled everything. As I walked out of the courtroom, the air outside felt lighter, freer. For the first time in years, I didn't have to shrink into the background. I was seen. I was heard. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy, but I had already taken the first step toward a life that was entirely my own, no longer defined by my marriage or my husband's success. I was now free to build the future I had always dreamed of. Thank you for following my story. If you want to hear more life-changing tales, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and stay tuned for more. Life stories like these are just the beginning.